Alrighty, hello everyone. I hope everyone had a great week. It's parshas tazria. Some interesting ideas here. Some kashas. Hopefully, we can come out with a worthwhile idea. So we have over here. It says that crazy. Okay, so essentially, the parsha starts out by talking about, what the parsha is named after, which is actually tazria. And then only really a short few psukim into it, it immediately switches over to tzaras, and then ultimately it goes into parshas metzorah next week, which is interesting. It's not 100%, clear that the name of parsha has to enclose within it an inyan which is only shaykh to that parsha, but it is enough to be worth pointing out that only the first 5 psukim are actually have anything to do with tazria, simply speaking. The rest just goes on to Nagayim, which is already metzorah. So it's interesting to note that there's so much of tazria which is just all Nagayim. Why would that not just be metzorah starting from there? Just an interesting aura. And Rashi over here we have, it says that Ishaki tazria, Amar Simlai, just like the tazria of a person is after all behema chayanov, in Ma'aser Bereshis, kach Torah and his parsha, achar Torah behema chayav. So too, its Torah was explained after the Torah of behema chaya and oif. Because previously, just coming off of this, you have different things about a animal which make it kosher to eat and make it not kosher to eat. So you see that there is the nesparish, the Torah of Adam, after the Torah of the animals. And the Rebbe Simlai is pointing out that this order reflects the order of Ma'aser Bereshis itself. Now, in the actual Rashi and the actual statement, there is a lot of problems. The main problems are that there is no way that you can possibly say that there's such a thing as Torah's Adam, which doesn't refer to the entire Torah. In other words, what is this talking about? The Torah of Adam was nisparish? There is no, what do you mean, the Torah of Adam? The whole Torah is the Torah of Adam. Everything is about man. And so what is this thing that Rabbi Samai is talking about, that there's some sort of idea of a parallel between the way that it worked in Ma'aser Bereshis and over here, and that there was a specific, what's he talking about? I guess parshas tazria is referring to the Torah's Adam, and that what came after Torah's Behema. I mean, in what way is tazria any more Torah's Adam than the rest of the entire Torah? We know that the entire Torah is Torah's Adam, and all Bria is for Adam. So, what does Rabbi Shammai even mean by the statement of Torah's Adam? And then the other shaila is essentially, what's the nafkamina? I think is really the question. Why does it matter why does it matter what was created first, and why should it reflect in the Torah of that thing what order it was in? So what difference does it make? Who cares? So I was created the first day, second day, who cares? I said, because we're created the world, what difference does it make what day it was created? And then even once you understand why it makes a difference, what is the connection between the day in Ma'aser Bereshis that was created, that order, and the order in which it will be nisparish, the Torah of it? Other shaila is what that we refer to. Clearly, we can't be referring to regular Torah here. What do we refer to when we say the Torah of an Adam? What does that even mean? What do those words mean? Torah's Adam. What does that mean? Let's go right over here. We have a medrash. A medrash states that it says, Achar v'kedem sartani. And we have the famous statement that says that if a person, let's see, there you go, where is it? Im zacha adam, im zacha adam nechel shnei lamas hazeh haba. Okay, okay, where do we have it? That wasn't it. Ah, im zacha adam amrin lai. If a person is zeicha, we say to him, "Ata kadamta l'chol ma'aseh bereshis." We say that he was kodim to all of my bereshis. V'im lav amrin lai, yatush kadamcha, shishol kadamcha. And this statement basically means that if a person is zeicha in life, he does the right thing, then we say to him, look how chashiv you are, you were created before all of my bereshis. And if a person is not zeicha, then we say to him, look, you were created the last on the sixth day, and yatush kadamcha, even the little bugs were created before you, right? Yatush kadamcha, shilshul kadamcha. Now, this statement, I'm only referencing it, obviously, because we have to try to figure out the understanding of the importance of the kedimus of, in terms of creation of my bereshis. It seems to be that if someone is zeicha, that is the reward or the ramification of that is that he was koyim in my bereshis, and if he wasn't, then he's last in my bereshis. That's why I'm bringing this in. But once we have the statement, it's based off this, this over here that it says that and that was on the first day, and then in the last day, obviously the physical bodies were created, as is written in the Chumash. So the shaila really is, what does it mean? In other words, it's obviously the case that the man was created on day 6. So what does it mean? If you were zeicha, you were the first day. If you weren't zeicha, I mean, you want to say some sort of Indian where it's like, I don't know what you're going to say. You tush kadamcha. The fact of the matter is that you were created on the 7th day. So what are you saying? That because you were zeicha, somehow that makes it that you were on the first day and therefore you were first in Bria? I mean, why? What makes it that the fact you were zeicha would magically make it that you would now be considered to have been created on the first day of Bria? So those are really the essential questions over here. And I think the beginning of the correct understanding of the sugya over here in parshas tazria lies in the correct understanding of the concept of tuma. And that is that, a very basic question here is, giving birth is the opposite. Well, I would say the opposite, but it seems to be that giving birth is in contrast to dying. And that's a hanacha that everybody would admit to, right? Something comes into life and something goes out of life. So we know that the Av HaTumah, the biggest, strictest, the epitome of Tumah, is Tmei Meis. That is an Av HaTumah. And we therefore have an understanding that Tumah is associated with Misa on a very, very high level. And it would seem therefore contradictory to say that when a woman gives birth, that she should become Tameh due to that act. I mean, L'chaira, Tumah is an Indian, has to do with death, not birth. And to answer that question, what we have to realize is that the concept of Tuma, and on a philosophical level, is the yesod of distortion. And what that means is that the lashon in Gemara in Aramaic, the ayin and the aleph switch out, and there is a lashon. It says that something is nitma, meaning that it was mixed in. And the yesod, therefore, really of Tuma, is a distortion. Now, what do we mean by distortion? What we mean distortion is a distortion from the underlying structures of the way reality is meant to occur, and the way that you can see if it was meant or not meant is in contrast to the time before Adam Harishon's sin, which brought Misa as a general concept upon the world. And we know that by Cain and Hevel, it says that Shnaim olamita va'arba yardu. And there's still like this with some animals, that originally in the concept of procreation was that the human being was supposed to be born, and then you're supposed to, in a matter of moments, evolve into a complete physically and mentally human being. And that's how that was meant to go. And the side of the distortion of that with Misa is it's two sides of the same coin. The concept of the prime of the human life is created because of the fact that at first you require constant care and are feeble, and then after the prime years you begin to decay at the leaving end, and both of those things are representative of the fact that the form which we take as human beings is an extremely distorted, incomplete, and basically just a distortion of the way that bria, of the way that creation and that we were meant to be and operate. And that distortion is what creates or is what's associated with tuma. So therefore, by misa, which is the ultimate distortion, like the Ramban asks in his ksavim, he says that it doesn't make sense that people get upset and get sad when someone dies, let's say a relative, because it doesn't really make sense. Because you think about it, if there's anything that you know is going to happen, you prepare for it to happen, you know for a fact, and you experience it in other ways, and you know that everybody knows that people will die. So why is it that it bothers them so much why is death such a bothersome thing to individuals when it occurs? And Ramban says is because Hagufa, our point, that what's bothering people, and they might not realize this, but what's really bothering people when death occurs, even though they know it's going to happen, they expect it to happen, prepare for it to happen, they have 100% knowledge, or they might even know what death feels like before from our previous, doesn't make a difference. What bothers people about it is that death is an aberration. It is something which is not meant to be. And a human being who is alive feels that way. And he has that intuitive emotion regarding the subject. And it is not untrue that on an emotional level, most people that are alive think that they will always be alive, which is a fascinating inyan, but I don't think it's untrue. Like, people deep down have a feeling that they are meant to be forever. That is a feeling. Now, they have an intellectual understanding, and then, as they say, realist, whatever it is, but there's an underlying feeling that human beings possess that they will be forever and they're meant to be forever. That's actually in the Ramban. And so, therefore, the concept of the Leda and the form in which the baby comes out is a distortion, and therefore it brings with it Tumah. And now we take that one step further into Tzaras. And we know that obviously Tzaras is the linking theme between the Yoletus and the Tzaras. And the Tzaras comes, and Tzaras is not something that we really have anymore, but according to most Farshim, it was a system of nace that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was noheg with the Jewish people to be elevated to a much higher standard of human interrelationship. And when we now come to define this concept, what does it mean, the Torah of something? So let's take the contrast by the animal, right? This is the contrast that Simlai made, right? So by the Torah, what was it? It was the aside that it's much more simple by an animal, because if we think about it, it's actually very intuitive. If we talk about, definitely in our state of Bria, the animal's top apex experience and purpose fulfillment is in its physical manifestation. Whether it's to be eaten, whether it's to be seen, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. An animal lives on a physical level. The Habias is a physical level. And therefore, it makes sense that there could be something as simple as a formation in the physical body of an animal, which could signify that it is not meant to be consumed. In other words, it is a puzzle, is not kosher animal. And the idea over here, though, is that by human beings, what is it now? Let's define. What does it mean, the tazria of human beings? The tazria of human beings means that it is a question of, just like there's psulim, there's non-kosher signs regarding behemos, that they're not meant to be consumed, there is by human beings as well. Now, it differs on several factors. The first of which is that obviously by human beings, because they are not, their purpose doesn't end in the physical manifestation of their bodies. It is therefore obvious that there are levels to the human being which one has to learn how to see and understand, that make it that this person should not be quote unquote consumed, which is now the second inyan, which what is the equivalent of the consumption by animals of human beings? The equivalent is relate to, accept, and allow the being to be part of the community. As the equivalent, those ideas are the equivalent of consumption by an animal. Like the Ramban says that, and all the Mepharshim says that, you are what you eat. There's an inyan that affects you in terms of what you are based off what you eat. So the same thing we do by a human being. If someone accepts a human being, allows them into their life, accepts them, allows them into the community, and this human being has X problem, that is a psul. It is just like for an animal, if it doesn't split hooves, that's a psul. This inyan on a human being, this behavior, this belief, this understanding, is a psul. So Torah, the word Torah, comes from the word of moiret, which means to show something. And the concept of that is that the Torah of the Adam is that an Adam is only, okay, or is only a good, decent human being who should be allowed to be among others, and who is doing what he is meant to do, if he doesn't have any of the problems that Sara'as comes to show about an individual. And that is what it means, the Torah of the Adam. And that is also why, obviously, in the nace that happened, when a person got Saras, he got Tuma, because again, Tuma is a lashon of distortion. It's the pshat that something is distorted. It's not what it's meant to be. When someone behaves in the mannerisms and the ideas and the mechanisms which bring upon one Saras, those mechanisms and ideas and behaviors are a distortion of the underlying humanity of human beings, of people. And therefore they get a tzaras, and therefore they get tuma. And that is really one way of saying it. The other way of saying it, l'gabe tzaras, is a little bit of a different, perhaps deeper concept. And that is that in an ultimate fashion, the bottom line purpose of individuals in terms of being in this world is in order to relate to other individuals and thus bring about, inspire, create context for, other people, so that they can also be, affected to come to a completion and get pleasure, etc., etc. So there is an aspect of the evolvement of the ultimate purpose of a human being, which is innately social. And therefore, when a person does the things which Charas causes, we separate him from other human beings because he is not contributing constructively to the purpose of his existence, which is inherently tied to relating to those around him. And I think that's probably something very intuitive that everybody can understand. Right? There's no, a world with literally nobody else but one person is not a meaningful world. It has the purpose of human beings in a very bottom line way is in terms of impacting other human beings. Now, whether that's directly, indirectly, action, role model, whatever it is, there's a whole slew of things that other human beings do to the perception of people who perceive them, thereby contributing to the human being perception. There's a list of things that occurs and different ways that happens. But the point is that the Kairas Adam in this second pshat is the idea of the ultimate purpose of the Adam, the underlying reality of the Adam. And that reality has in it an inherent social factor, as we're saying, and therefore that is what it means, the Tairas Adam. Even though it's true, the rest of the Torah it's all about Adam. So what does it mean, Tairas Adam? It means that these things are things that cause a person to have taras, which cause him to be excluded, which essentially block him from fulfilling his purpose as an Adam, and therefore these things and this sugya of taras is considered to be the sugya of Tairas Adam. That's according to the second pshat. So it's either the first pshat, which is that they're a distortion. If you do these things, they're a distortion of the human being, therefore they have tumah, and merely you separate from those around you, or Torah is the second pshat. Now, just interesting to understand that in the Medrash, they have here a list of 11 different things that Taras comes for. And although this is a pretty generic, common denominator among the things here, it could be accurate. This is more a suggestion at this point. So we have over here like this. You curse God, damim. You say something about your friend that it's not true. You're haughty. You go into a boundary that's not yours. In other words, it's a in terms of life rule. Like the example that it gives later on is of Uziyahu, that he tried to be a Kohen. Al-Lashon Sheker, say something about someone that's not true. A Gnevo, stealing, Shua Sheker, swearing something that's not true. Mechal Shem Shamayim, desecrate God's name, Habayas Kechav. And Habayas Kechav. So, again, this is a lot of different things, and to find the precise thread is difficult, but I think perhaps, the common thread here is that all of these things and the actions that result from them are mannerisms, perspectives, ideas, and ways of behavior which are precisely what we're talking about until now. In other words, they are distortions of reality. When you're Bakal the shame, that's Gilerai, Shrichas Dam, and Zara is the three ways that people are meant to relate to those around them. Davar she'ein boy, Gasus Aruach, as you think of it, that's for sure. Again, you're trying to be something that you're not. Lashon Sheker, same thing, it's falsity. Gnebo, stealing someone else's stuff, again, Sheker. So you could hear that all these things in a one format or another are things that a person does to distort Matthias. In other words, to distort the actual reality that is. Definitely all things that have to do with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Obviously we understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the ultimate reality. Therefore, anything you do to push him out is going to be a distortion of it, and therefore it will be a reason for you to get zaras, which will be a reason for you to become tameh. So we understand right away, kill Hashem. And then the other things also seem to have a certain thread of distortion of truth or lack of truth. Right? You say something that's not true, or you're a guy of a dick, which is obviously an inherently false emotion to have. And also, you're encroaching upon something that's not yours, not meant to be yours. And sheker, that's obviously falsity. Gnebus is doing something that doesn't belong to you, right? Shua Sheker, same thing. And so it seems to be that you can taka say this, that it's taka the aside that a person either does an action which is promotes or expresses within falsity, or he is trying to be something that he's not, or he's distorting his relationship with Hakadosh Baruch Hu to a very high degree. All those things are essentially distortions of the way that an Adam is meant to operate and is meant to be, and is what he really actually is. And therefore, when someone does this, they would get tzaras, so that Hakadosh Baruch Hu would be trying to tell them that they're in a bad place and they need to be misguided and figure out what state of distortion they have fallen into, and fix it. And I think probably the Iker life lesson that can be learned from here is that although there is obviously the entire Torah is an obligatory, there are certain things that are mamish a distortion of what a human being is meant to be, and it's worth looking into these things and seeing what the inverse is, which would obviously be the more clear expression of what one is meant to be, and therefore to work and on them and embrace them. So the opposite of those things, whether it's make sure to be mevarech Hashem, making sure to be very careful on I guess for shlichus embarrassing others. Gila Rais would be like looking at other girls, or making sure to only say the truths about your friends, gas saruach, to be humble. All the inverses of these things. They, according to the Arshat, these things are special in the manner that they are the definition of the distortion of what an Adam is meant to be, because they are the Torah's Adam. They are the Torah of an Adam, and therefore, they get very general as well. Obviously, the Shalosh Chamuras are here, but and that's why, by the way, Rabbi Seinu Amrim, Amisha Benayat V'Divrei Sarah. You see, so that it really this last line really proves my point almost completely, because now it goes. Chazal are making a full circle. Now they're saying this is the Teres Adam, and that's Negat Teras. And how do you get Negat Teras? By being Menayas Divrei Torah. If Menayas Divrei Torah, that's the whole Torah. So it is the whole Torah. That's Teres Adam. So how is this Teres Adam? Elamai. The pshat is that if someone has been Nayat with Divrei Torah, it basically means that they decide to not be a part of the Torah and its mitzvos, which are the description of what a person is, and therefore when you menayetz them, and you go against them or you insult them, then you are removing yourself from that, and you are therefore distorting all of the human being that you are, which therefore leads to the tum. So I think that's a very worthwhile thing to point out over here. And I mean, probably on a more general level, it has to do with the acceptance and the understanding that there is an objective reality, there is what is true and what is not true, and it's worthwhile to work towards getting to a place that a person's mode of self-expression is totally accurate and real, and what he cares about is only accurate and real things that actually matter, and that is a very worthwhile thing to pursue and do. And obviously, it's done through Limud Torah, because someone's learning about what's really true or not true. That creates within him the care and desire and attachment to making sure that he does care about what's real and what's not real. That's why he's learning. So obviously, general Limud Torah does this, but again, there is all these other specifics which one can check out the inverse and embrace. And probably the last thing over here is probably important to know that one could ask that the Torah Shabbat has to be the Doros, has to be relevant now. but we don't have tazria anymore. So how is it still relevant? Probably one can say this is getting a little bit fluffy. I think it's emes, regardless of its texture of Torah. One can say that their taka is a meaning Hakadosh Baruch Hu does, so to speak, have a form of tzaras which he still to this day gives us, and one has to. You can use these things, and you can really be aware of if Hakadosh Baruch Hu um, brings tzara, a general tzara, even if it's not tzara'as, but a general tzara upon someone. Usually, that is Hakadosh Baruch Hu trying to tell him that there's something about the way that he's operating which is unsustainable, not true, inappropriate, and that there's a manner of change that should be taken. So even if we don't have tzaras as obvious, and that's really what it is, and tzaras was just an extremely obvious manifestation of an issue of someone. So it's like, I don't know what God is saying. I don't know. Do I have to change? Do I have to change? Oh, I got tzaras. Oh, wow. Obviously, okay, there's something really wrong. It's a very obvious manifestation of basically a God's Baruch Hu telling you there's an issue. Now, Bisman says, since we live in Hester Panim, the manifestation and the events that occur in a person's life might not be as obvious that what's occurring is meant to deliver a message in terms of something, but it is still true 100% that it happens, and that there is, if we are conscious and aware of our lives and what occurs in it, there is definitely messaging from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in terms of the way our realities play out, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us yes or no on things. There's definitely that, if one is acute and sensitive to it, and a person also has to daven that it happens for him. A person has to daven that he wants to go on the right path, and he wants HaKadosh Baruch Hu to show him and tell him the right way, and to make sure that he's developing positively. If a person doesn't want that, then it could maybe taka be that maybe it's not going to happen for him, at least not in any way that he can perceive on a simple level. So that is very, very, very important, and I think a tremendous avoda and life lesson for us from this parsha. Everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos.